Hey everyone, Anark here, and this is the first installment in a series that I'm calling Liberation in Action, where in each episode I take a singular example of a liberatory revolutionary project or autonomous region, and I go through some of the broader details of its history and its ideology and its structural function. And today's example is going to be Rojava. However, before I get to that, I just want to say, if you appreciate the work that I'm doing on this channel, you should go over to my Patreon and become a patron for any amount. $2, $5, $7, $10, $20, whatever you can spare is so helpful in helping me find the time to make these videos and do the research that's necessary and hopefully get the word out about revolutionary projects, both in the modern day and throughout history. And if you become a patron for any amount, you'll get access to the Anark Discord server, where we have a great community. We discuss things like theory, praxis, history, and current events. So if you want access to that Discord server and you want to help this channel spread and grow, then go over to the Patreon and become a patron. But that's enough for the spiel. Let's get started with the video. So, preface before we get started, I am not an expert on Rojava. I've read plenty of articles, and a lot of those will be quoted down in the description, but I have never been to Rojava. I'm not in contact with people that are there. I have to read about it secondhand by reading their constitutions and news articles and so on. So you can take what I say with a grain of salt. However, if you'd like to read further into anything that I'm describing here, you can go down to the description and read those articles for yourself. And I should also say, what I'm calling Rojava in this video, they don't really call Rojava anymore. They call it AANES, which stands for Autonomous Administration of Northeast Syria. However, here I'm going to keep calling it Rojava because that's just a lot easier name to say than AANES every single time. Also, I think most people are probably more familiar with the name Rojava than they are with AANES. So you'll have to forgive me for using this outdated terminology as we proceed. So Rojava has now been around for a little over a decade. It began in 2013 and has persisted until the present day, and it has an autonomy of about 2 million people functioning under this decentralized, localized government. It's mostly influenced by an ideology called democratic confederalism. However, it's very influenced by a bunch of other ideologies as well, including feminism, along with their own strain of feminism called genealogy, communalism, social ecology, the thought of Abdullah Öcalan, and the thought of Murray Bookchin. AANES, as the name might suggest, is in northeast Syria, and it arose during the Syrian civil war. This area in northeast Syria was largely abandoned by the Syrian government and had been taken over by ISIS. However, the fighting forces and political parties that now compose Rojava really did a lot of work to oust ISIS from the area, and there is now no presence of ISIS there. Also, the Syrian government has not seized back that land. So what that means is those communities that rest there in northeastern Syria, including the Kurds, the Assyrians, and a variety of other ethnic minorities, are all working together to create a pluralistic, multi-ethnic society. The main conflict that Rojava is embroiled in today is actually a conflict with Turkey. Turkey is now undergoing a significant incursion into the lands of Rojava, and they are devastating critical infrastructure. They are starving large portions of the population, and they are generally undergoing a series of war crimes and broader military operations. Rojava is putting up a pretty significant fight. However, Turkey has superior air power, so it remains to be seen how much longer that Rojava will continue. However, they have fought through a lot of really rough situations in this past decade, so there's a very high likelihood that they will persist. So let's just start with the general structural function of Rojava. Rojava has had a variety of different constitutions, and these constitutions are determined through both a series of planning committees, but then also directly democratic input from all of the different layers of councils and local committees that exist within Rojava. They're very proactive about creating new constitutions, which balance the needs of the autonomy as a wartime economy with the desires of the masses of people who actually live and determine the future of that autonomy. The most recent constitution was actually passed in 2023, and it continues to do things like enshrine the rights of women, youth, minorities of both the ethnic and religious variety in their participation in all forms of government. Every person in Rojava has the right to organize at all of the various scales of the structure in their society. And some of those scales, for example, are the commune, the cooperative, councils, federations, associations, unions, and autonomous administration. At all of these scales, there is a 40% requirement for the participation of women. And this is to fight back against problems with patriarchy in the Middle East, which is a very central concern for the people there in Rojava. Abdullah Öcalan was highly influenced by the anti-hierarchical views of Murray Bookchin, and he considers one of the primary problems of hierarchy within the Middle East to be patriarchy and the oppression of women. And so this focus on the liberation of women is at the center of the project there in Rojava. Nonetheless, each of the different examples I gave in the previous list, they all do different kinds of things within the society that they've got. Some of them are just different because they function at different scales, and other ones of them are different because they just have different focuses. However, the smallest of these is the commune, and that is the one that is situated down at the level of the people in society. That is where directly democratic decision-making takes place within neighborhoods. After that, these council structures then elect delegates to go plead their case at larger and larger scales in order to do coordination and planning for things that are at those larger regional levels. However, I should note these are delegates, not representatives. And that is to say, these delegates come along with a mandate. They are there to argue for a point, and that is the point of the councils that they came from. These people are not there to make decisions for the people. They're there to represent the decisions of the people. And for this reason, they can have that mandate revoked at a whim by the councils that they originate from. In this way, the smallest scale actually has the most supremacy over decisions in Rojava. That is to say, when the smallest scale makes decisions about their scale, that is held to be the highest law of how things function at that scale, not the decisions of the largest scale. The only exception is that all of those decisions that are made at the smaller scale still have to abide within the dictates of their social contract as they've determined it within the Constitution that they've all democratically agreed to. And as a result, this leads to a lot of directly democratic community control, and the power largely remains in the hands of the people, even as there has been some devolution of this power in the last few iterations of their constitution. Even the larger layers within their mission statements say that they are supposed to increase decentralization, not increase their own central power in the process. So, for example, the Syrian Democratic Council, which is one of the key executive aspects of Rojava, we'll get to that here in a minute, still has within its mission statement to develop a pluralistic, democratic, and decentralized system for all of Syria. So this aspect of localism and decentralization is still a huge focus for Rojava. Next, I will move on to the justice system. First, I'm just going to say up front, it has the lowest crime rate of anywhere in that entire region. In fact, the crime rate plummeted once Rojava was put in place. And even when compared to the areas where the Syrian government has reclaimed control and the areas where Turkey has come in and claimed control, Rojava still has lower crime rates than both of those regions. In fact, the places where the Syrian government claimed and the places where Turkey claimed, they actually had increased crime rates. So when Rojava took control, crime rates went down. When Syria and Turkey took control, crime rates actually went up. So you might be asking, well, why is that the case? The reason is because of how Rojava's justice system is actually formed. It's not a punitive justice system. It actually has various layers of restorative and transformative justice that people go through well before they ever get to anything like a court system which hands out punitive measures. Their focus is on trying to develop a consensus among people who are harmed and those who did the harm about why the harm took place and how things can be changed such that it doesn't happen again. The system has a strong focus on trying to de-escalate problems and socially reintegrate people that have done things that are wrong, trying to develop their integration with the community, trying to reduce the amount of harmful behaviors they engage in the future. In fact, this has been so amazingly successful that it has even led to the decrease of ethnic strife in the area. Ethnic problems that had gone back so far, blood feuds between tribes that went back centuries, that have now been resolved in short order by these council structures that have been developed within this autonomy. And they did all of this while essentially abolishing the police. That is to say, they have replaced the police with what are called defense committees. Instead of an unaccountable group of police officers who can really just go around and do violence as they please, these defense committees are actually of the people of that area. They are elected, they are rotated, and everybody is given an opportunity to engage in this de-escalation, to be peacemakers, not to go around just trying to find punitive measures to crack down on crime. And accordingly, because they are elected and rotated, anybody that is in one of these defense committees can just be revoked at a whim, kind of like a lot of the other things we've discussed. So if somebody were to abuse that power that they've been given, it could just be taken away from them whenever the community decides that they are no longer worthy of holding that responsibility. Next, we have education. Rojava actually also has one of the highest education rates in any of the surrounding areas, and their education has a strong focus on progressive issues like feminism and revolutionary ideology and respect for the ecology. They have not only primary and secondary school, but they also have fully functioning universities. Next, we then have healthcare. They also have pretty good healthcare as compared to a lot of surrounding regions. For example, they have universal healthcare. Anybody can get medical treatment in Rojava. This healthcare mixes modern medicine and traditional medicine. So this is not to say that they're going to give you traditional medicine when they should be doing modern medical interventions. This is to say they don't preclude the possibility that they might use traditional medicine in order to solve problems. However, if you need serious modern medical intervention, you can get that medical intervention when it is necessary. And I should say you'll be prescribed the right medical intervention, but one of the problems they're currently facing is that they're having issues doing some of the more sophisticated medical interventions, mostly for lack of supplies, lack of access to specialized medical equipment, lack of access to surgical expertise. However, that is currently changing. As of last year, they have just passed a series of proposals which would expand the sophistication of their healthcare program. Next on the list, we've got economics. So I should just say up front, Rojava did not take a sort of expropriative approach to their economy. They didn't just seize everything from private owners. Instead, what they did is they allowed people who had private property beforehand to keep their private property. But what they did in order to develop worker ownership was they put in place a series of incentives that made it to where if you want to start a commune or a cooperative, they incentivize that process. And that is to say that those are fully fully integrated with the civil council structures of their society. So if what you need is startup funds, or you need to be given infusions of cash at any given time, you are integrated with those council structures. And so they can help you with those problems. They can give you the money that is needed in order for you to, start up your cooperative or expand your cooperative. Whereas if you have private property, you're on your own. The way they look at it is, a cooperative or a commune, that's something that is, held in collective hands, and it helps the collective, so the collective should contribute to it. Whereas if you're trying to maintain your private property, well, you set off out on your own, so you can make do on your own. However, this has been pretty successful. Before Rojava, there were no cooperatives, or that is to say, there were an extremely small number of cooperatives. However, now, based on the region you're in, you might be looking at something between 3 to 7% of the total economy being controlled by cooperatives and economic communes. And I guess I should also mention that there are economic communes. We're not only talking about worker cooperatives, we're also talking about situations where all of the property is actually completely collectivized together with those council structures in some area. And these have been pretty successful. Almost all of our examples of both of these are agricultural in nature. And interestingly, there are a lot of these that are headed up by women. You might be noticing a trend here. Once again, Rojava is a very feminist revolution, and a lot of these new cooperatives and communes that are being created are women-led. So Rojava is constantly in the process of expanding its cooperative economy. In just a decade, they went from 0% cooperatives to about 5 to 7% cooperatives. So they're doing pretty good at that rate. Next, we've got the military. So the military of Rojava is one of the places where you see kind of a mixture of some centralization and decentralization. So there is, in fact, a central military command, and it is associated with some of the primary political parties of Rojava as well. However, the actual army itself is decentralized. That is to say, it is a confederation of militias that have the autonomous ability to make decisions and act on strategic imperatives that have been handed down to them. However, this has been very, very effective. Remember what I said, they pushed ISIS out of this region, right? This was an area that used to be controlled by Syria, and ISIS pushed out the Syrian government from this region and forced them to essentially cede this territory. However, Rojava pushed ISIS completely out of northeast Syria, and now it is completely controlled by this pluralistic, feminist, multi-ethnic society. And this was largely the doing of this decentralized, confederated militia structure, wherein, once again, many of these militias are women's militias. And in fact, these women's militias have been some of the most successful parts of this militia confederation. The women's defense units are known to be fierce warriors that are highly effective. So Rojava is often pointed to as a great example of how decentralization is actually a highly advantageous military tactic. Before I close out the video, however, I want to just kind of air some concerns and criticisms of mine. I'll probably do these on several of the ones that we bring up, but here I think it's somewhat necessary. Rojava definitely has some degree of centralization, not to the degree that I would say they have a state, but they definitely have something that could grow into a state. I'm a little concerned that some of these centralized bodies, such as the military command and some of those executive planning committees, could definitely evolve into a sort of elite bureaucratic political class, which could itself vest power over this autonomous region and could really pull back a lot of the gains that have been had in this last decade for the autonomous control of the people in northeastern Syria. At the moment, because there is still a significant amount of decentralized local control, I don't think that I would characterize them as having a state, but there is a concern that such a thing might arise in the future. However, I still find Rojava to be an inspiring project. I wouldn't say it's explicitly anarchist. As you'll note in the beginning of the video, that's not one of the things I noted in the list of ideologies. It is not anarchist. However, it is influenced by an anarchist thinker, and that is Murray Bookchin. So Murray Bookchin, for most of his life, was an anarchist until late in his life when he began to call himself a communalist or a social ecologist. And the works of Murray Bookchin were very influential in this region. So I would say this is a good example of a libertarian socialist project, or more broadly, a sort of horizontal power structure. In Rojava, they really have a heavy emphasis on trying to empower these local council structures, the concept of subsidiarity, as it's called, trying to let the smallest unit deal with its problems first and empowering them to actually deal with their problems, instead of hoping that some central planner will be able to create a plan that just subsumes everything all at once and deals with all of the problems universally. That's not what's happening in Rojava. And that's why I think it continues to be inspiring to a lot of anarchists and libertarian socialists more broadly. And there is a lot more that could be said about Rojava. I mean, entire books have been written about Rojava. It is a very sophisticated project. Like I said, it has around 2 million people in this autonomy, and it is really directly embroiled in some of the most important Middle Eastern geopolitics one could imagine. They're currently under siege by Turkey, which is a NATO member group. They are autonomous inside of Syria, which is a very powerful Middle Eastern country. They were party in ousting ISIS, who is an extremely important jihadist group there in the Middle East. They are at the center of all of these very important political events. There's a lot to be said. There are so many more details that I've left out of this analysis in order to kind of maintain brevity. But what I hope I've done is given you kind of at least an overview of what's going on there. If you'd like to learn more, I've put a lot of sources down in the description that you can go read about. One of them I'd really like to point out is the YouTube video called The Communes of Rojava. Even though some of that is a little out of date because it was made a few years back and they've had a completely new constitution since then, my impression is that a lot of that is still very accurate. But anyway, that's about all the summary I'm going to give for Rojava in this video. I hope that was helpful for you. If it was, you should like the video. If you have any comments or thoughts, you should go down below and comment. Give me more information. Give me updates. Give me thoughts and criticisms if you have any. Lastly, if you appreciate the work that I'm doing here, I just want to emphasize again to go become a member of the Patreon for any amount, $2, $5, $7, $10, $20. Any of those amounts would be enormously helpful for the future of this channel, and they help me continue making videos like this one. In fact, the next video is going to be over the Zapatistas in Chiapas, Mexico, and I think you're really going to enjoy that one. On any occasion, if you choose to become a patron in any of those tiers, you will get access to the Anark Discord server, which is a really great community of people where we talk about theory and praxis and history and current events and all kinds of things. So if that's interesting to you, you should go become a patron over on my Patreon. And that's it. That's the spiel, everyone. I hope you're enjoying these new videos that I'm doing, Liberation and Action. This is going to be a whole series. Down in the description, you can also find the total list of all of the different projects I plan on looking into and making videos about. And I also want to say, if you've stuck around this long, you're probably really interested in this project. And if you are, I just want to say, what I need is people to help me do research. You know, I've created this Excel spreadsheet where essentially I've just like laid out all of these different fields, you know, the population, the ideology, the lifetime of a bunch of different examples. And what I really need is people who want to do the grunt work of helping me fill out that spreadsheet. So at least I'll have a basis of knowledge for a bunch of different examples that I'm going to cover in this series. And if you want to help me with that, you can send me a DM on Twitter. You can send me a DM on Patreon. If you're on the Discord, obviously, you can just tell me you want to help on the Discord. Communicate with me however you can, and I'll try to give you a link to that spreadsheet. But I think that's about it for this video. I hope that was educational and interesting at the same time. And I look forward to making the next one. Anyway, I think that's it for today. I'll see y'all later.